Greetings, everyone. My name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach, and I am one of the senior partners at the Wellness Universe as well. I'm also a best-selling author and a contributor to a multitude of books on Laura DeFranco's Brave Healer Productions library. Today, I am kind of excited and a little nervous, to be honest, because today's topic is about using AI, that thing that is becoming pervasive. It's something that everybody has heard about by now. I'm sure that there's probably not too many people on the planet who have never heard of AI. And it's becoming so pervasive that we are beginning to wonder, well, where's it going to stop? Is it going to stop? Is it going to take over the world? Is it going to become like Skynet in the Terminator series? Who knows? I honestly believe that, like any other tool, any tool really, if you think about it, can be used for good or for bad. And AI, as I've been experiencing it over the years, has shown itself to be a pretty powerful support tool in many of the things that I do, and especially in my writing. But I had a conversation with my guest today I think it was about a week ago, and he was talking to me about using AI as a personal growth ally. And I thought, whoa, that's pretty out there idea. And yet, given that AI has moved into things like, medicine, dentistry, all kinds of medical aspects, even pharmacology, I'm sure, it seems reasonable to assume that sooner or later it's going to become a part of our psychological framework as well. So I'm kind of excited about talking about this, and I would like to take the time to introduce my guest. His name is Frank Byram, and he's from Virginia. He is a director of innovation, and he's been involved in using AI for all kinds of amazing purposes in terms of business technology. But he's also a man who has done a lot of personal growth work, and he's been very busy with things like martial arts, with meditation, with all kinds of cool stuff that he's going to share, I'm sure, today. And I think what I'm really fascinated about is how he is using AI to support him in his personal growth journey. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Frank Byram to the program. Frank, come on camera. Let's say hello and see what's going on here.
Hey, David, I appreciate the kind words and introduction. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you. Yeah, well, I think we should share, first of all, that you and I were co-authors in a book. I think we published in October of 2024. Yep. I happened to be the lead author of that one. It was called Gifts of Wisdom, and that was a great time. We had a good bunch of people. We had some really wonderful chapters, and yeah,
a great book. And one that I hope would speak to, let's say, what the generations behind us, because I think that's really the goal, was to leave, some really practical wisdom to manage what's going on today and what we see emerging. Right. Something we hard won, if you want to look at it that way. It's tried and true, and just to try to pass it along as really a true gift. And I think that was the value of that group of people who put together that book, is that I think it was from the hearts of those folks to make it a gift to the generations behind us, and practical. Like, it wasn't some,
right.
It was practice. It was practice philosophy. It was real. It was good stuff. Right. It was a great book.
Right. Yeah. And, this is one thing I've noticed with pretty much all of Laura's publications. She's been focused on the not self-help, but the wellness aspect of life. Physical wellness, emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, and mental wellness. And some of the books that she's put out are absolutely amazing. And I've had the good fortune to be a co-author on, I don't know, I think I'm coming up to number 15 or something now. Yeah. And I know you've been a co-author in several as well.
7 or 8 of them I've done. And really, for me, one of the problems, or one of the potential challenges, I think, of the sort of the industry, the wellness industry and self-help, that whole kind of general industry, is a lot of it, at least what I was trying to bring to the industry, is this idea that it is a practice, it's a daily thing. It's something we do. It's not, right. It's not, hey, I read the book, I got the idea, and I can go in life. It's actually something you practice on a day in and day out basis. not unlike the martial arts you mentioned. You excel because you practice. You don't excel because you kind of just have a lesson. I had a friend once who wanted to bring her daughter by before college and said, "Hey, she wants to learn martial arts this afternoon." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, you know,
Well,
you
you've
know,
learned the words martial arts. That much you can
right,
learn
right.
in an afternoon.
Yeah, so 3 years at a minimum to get a black belt, 3 to 5 years. So it's not an afternoon practice. And I would say a lot of what, I focus on, and I think a lot of what you focus on over the years is this idea that, hey, we're practicing. Spirituality is something we do. Wellness is something you do day in and day out. It's not like you show up and say, I'll be well today or tomorrow, and then the next day I
Right.
can do whatever, right? It's something you must invest in like just anything else. And it's far better done in small increments and daily practices than it is in some, major effort on the weekend and then forget two
Right.
weeks kind of thing. It's a continuous thing, and
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the word practice, I think, is something that maybe people shy away from. Well, that means I have to keep doing it, you know?
So
I
yeah,
like to think of it instead as a way of life. It's a lifestyle choice. It's not so much a practice. I mean, it is a practice, but it's a lifestyle choice, you know?
it is, and I learned a big lesson on that a number of years ago. I was focused on becoming a master in the martial arts, a fourth degree at the time, and the grandmaster gave me, if you know what a kata is, 50 katas a day for 100 days. The
Oh,
practice, as you
wow.
said, and it took me several years to get 100 consecutive days from injury, life, and that kind of stuff. And I learned the same thing 50 times every day. It took hour a day, and I learned what practice really meant during that time. Like I
Right.
stopped and started many times. It's all the things you might mean. It's all the fun you get. It's sometimes the boring. It's the you did it on. I did it on days that I was sick. I did it on days I was tired. And it taught me, what that really means in time. And I don't think it should be drudgery, but I do believe any spiritual practice does come with. I think that's why we use the word practice after the word spiritual. Like it's
Sure.
spirituality.
Yeah.
Spirituality is a practice in the end.
Right.
Religious communities do it as well, right? At some level, but we all know the kind of sterile, fall flat kind of stuff of just showing up, let's say on the weekend for a service, and then Monday you're different, right? The practice is the thing you do every day. It's the action. The old
Right.
actions speak louder than words kind of thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking about this 50 kata, Kata, is that right? Kata,
50
50
calls a
katas
day.
a day.
Yeah. Yes.
And was each kata was different from the other ones? Was it
No, each kata,
no?
same kata. The
I
same
see.
kata. And by the time I was done, I think I don't know the exact count, but I think I did about 12,000 of them over that period because every day you're picking up 100. Every 2 days is 100, right? And I
Right.
stopped and started. I was injured some,
Sure.
and so I had to wait and heal and that kind of thing. But I think somewhere around 12 or 15,000, I stopped counting. And oddly enough, I still do that same kata now, almost 10 years later. Like I'm still doing that same work nearly every day or every few days. I'm still doing the same thing. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so,
it's pretty interesting. It becomes almost second nature after a while.
yeah, he would say, and I agree with him, the goal of any practice is he would pull a skin up and say, become your skin. Right. And what he's really trying to say is that it's integral to who you are. It's not something separate you do. It's
Right.
it's it's not a part of it's not something that can even be separated from you. You've done it so
Right.
much. It's the muscle memory. It's the reflex and all that kind of stuff. And oddly enough, on the science side, that muscle memory is myelination of tissue in the brain, and that's from the repetition. And so, speed and muscle memory is repetition. So that's where
Yeah.
muscle memory comes from. It doesn't come from. It's not in your muscles per se. It's in your brain
Right.
in a lot of ways.
So
So
it sounds like your master teacher was very wise. He said, "Oh, I see what's going on. Frank wants to be a master. Okay, Matt, here you do this." And it reminded me of the old, was a kung fu show, Patience, Grasshopper.
Absolutely, it was a little bit of that, and everyone at that level got a little bit different depending on what their needs were, and he said in the old traditions, after you completed your training, you would go out and be of service to the Japanese higher echelons or whatnot, and you would do the 100 days of training as a post. Something you would continue to do after you finish working with your master. So I was remote. I didn't see him but a few times a year, and so that was my homework. And
Right.
and
And isn't it all homework?
it's all homework. It's all
That's right.
homework.
Yeah.
It's all homework.
And
Absolutely.
home is right here.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing to realize is home is what you take home with you, right?
Right.
Home isn't the physical place that you see behind me. Home is the heart, what I bring with me. That's absolutely very true. Absolutely true.
I wanted to just add one more thing to this before we switch gears. This idea of practice, and I really loved your example of the 50 katas in 100 days thing, because when somebody first hears 50 katas in 100 days, maybe they don't know what a kata is. So I don't know, is that 10 seconds of work? Is it 5 minutes of work? Is it how much work is involved in one kata? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's easy or whether it's hard. The big picture, the many repetitions over a long period of time, that is what the ego mind latches onto. And it's the ego mind that's going to say, oh man, I really don't want to do this today. And as long as you let your ego mind keep running the show, well, you're not going to get it done. It's really that simple. When you come down into your heart and you say to yourself, I really want to be a master. And in order to be a master, I must begin by mastering this little thing. And it is a little thing. It just seems big right now because I haven't taken little pieces out of it yet. And so each of us can learn from that one example. A practice just means getting better at whatever it is you're doing. I mean, I remember I wanted to do 100 push-ups. And my body at that point in time could do maybe 20. And I said, okay, it's hard right now, And I just kept working at it day after day after day. And soon I realized, man, I can add 10 more today. And then one day I said, I can add 20 more. Before I knew it, I was up to 70. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go for the whole 100 today. It's really interesting how that happens, It's like Lao Tzu said, the journey of 1,000 miles always begins with the first step. And that step can be a small one. So give yourself permission to have the small step and then learn to get comfortable with all the subsequent steps that come in. And before you know it, you will be up the top of that mountain.
Absolutely. I think one of the things he was teaching me, which I didn't understand initially, is that if most people have seen a kata, it's the sort of dance thing that you see people do with the punches and that kind of stuff. That's what it is. There's 1 to 2 minutes per kata. But really what occurs is in that kata are all the necessary martial arts movements, at least the one I was doing, that one would need to know everything that you'd want to know in the whole system, including all the things one would need to know about weapons and short, medium, long weapons and all that kind of stuff, all in that one kata. And so what occurs after a while of boredom, and just mastery at some level, you start looking at nuance and you start thinking about, what does this mean? What is that? Where's the person? Where is this hit? What happened if you did this? Kind of thing. And so what he was teaching me is that in the practice was the discovery process of how it worked for me and how I was going to use it in any sort of any sort of method or way. And so it became not so much something that I had to endure, but something that became the framework that I discovered martial arts from. And that is where I think it's interesting about daily practice. It's sometimes like, many people journal, some people pray, some people chant, whatever. These are the gateways, the gateway practice. This is like the beginning, like I got into it. Like I chant, or I sing, or whatever you end up doing, right? That's the preparation for the discovery. And I
Right.
think that's the lesson that I'd love people to take away, is that a lot of what we do in daily practicing, be it even journal, what you write isn't the point to some extent. It's the discovery over time of what's going on, what's the process, what's in my mind, what's coming out of it. And it's the self-discovery. And I think all practices have that opportunity not just to discover self, but also discover something higher as well. So that was the secret to the whole thing in the end, and the hard
Right.
part.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that, using it as a gateway. In other words, it's the entry point. It's the point through, once you go through that gate, you're in a whole new world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Why do you think? I mean, so my Catholic friends, they do the rosary, and I've talked to them a bit about it, and I'm saying, why? What are you doing? And then as we discussed, I realized really what you're doing is that's the preparation for prayer. It's not the
Right.
prayer, right?
Right.
It's a cue to know that you're changing from the secular world, if you will, to the spiritual world, or to a different place. And I think most spiritual traditions have something like that. But I believe in our daily practice, we can develop something that works for us.
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I noticed we got a couple of people on the live presentation here today. I just want to invite you, please feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat. If you have something for me or have something for Frank, just put it in there. We'll do our best to answer those questions as we proceed. So we've been talking a lot about practice and about the gateway into who we really are and all this kind of stuff. So let's just dive in and let's start asking the question. I think people are probably intrigued by this idea of using artificial intelligence to help them with that process. So where do we start with this? Because it's such a massive topic.
Absolutely. And just so the folks listening to this know, AI is my day job. Like that's what
Right.
I do for a living, right? I'm an innovator on that. I do development and develop systems and solutions using AI and using emerging AI. So if you can think, I'm sitting on that end of the tech world at some level.
Oh, and
And
just to be clear, you're not developing AI models per se. You're using them for other purposes. Is that right? I want to make the distinction here.
we do both. We tend to build on AI models. So, for example, if you know ChatGPT or any of the other models, we could leverage those, but we would build on top of those. And in some cases, we build on top of what's called open source models. And these are much smaller models, but we absolutely are training them and doing things that's called super fine tuning and post model training and that kind of stuff. And we train them for specific purposes. So, yeah, we do train models. We don't tend to train them from scratch much, but we do if under certain conditions. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And
All right.
so,
So I've had some exposure. I mean, I'm a computer scientist. I went through a lot of that stuff, so I understand the technology on some level. But some of our listeners might not understand. Can you please describe in a few short sentences that, say, a 7 or 8 year old could understand how does AI get trained? That whole thing is a mystery to a lot of people.
it's still a mystery in the industry a lot, but I'll give you a general sense. Let's take ChatGPT because I think that's what most people know. Effectively, what they've done is have vacuumed up, if you will, all the data of humanity. That's not too much of an understatement. And they use that as training input. That's the first part of the step. Is that they use something, a fancy piece of technology called a transformer. But if you want to think of it, it mirrors the neural paths of your mind. I think that's the easiest way to think about it. You run the training data through it. There's a little bit of magic in that. Over time, with enough training, it actually does develop and understand the semantics and linguistic structure that we do. The rest of that, you'll hear other things like guardrails and those kinds of things. Those are things that you sort of train out of it. So, for example, you don't want people doing evil things with ChatGPT, for example, because it knows how to do everything from build bombs and do bad things. All that kind of stuff's in the training data, so you got to put a guardrail on it. And then there's ethical guardrails that have to do with, you know, sexuality and this kind of things you don't want it to do. That all that gets guardrailed out of it. And then it gets kind of a personality, a soul, if you will. And that soul, mostly in this day, is saying, hey, I'm going to make something that is an assistant for someone that's trying to be helpful to someone. And so that's fundamentally what that ends to be. And then when you talk to it, you're prompting it and asking it questions. And it's a reasonable proxy for most of the knowledge of humanity. And so in that knowledge, you know, it occurred to me, you know, quite some time ago, is all of the religious practices, right? All the religious text, right? All the philosophy, all of the wisdom teachings are, you know, all the mystic practices are all sitting in that, in that data. And so you can ask it questions, and you can use it as a mirror or an amplifier. So it can be used good or bad, as you said before. And so it's a really useful tool. So like if you wanted to explore the scripture, you can use it to explore it. You can ask what different, let's say, denominations thought, or you can ask how a Buddhist thought about it. You can ask how, you know, whatever. You can ask those questions, and it will give you, not perfect, but a fairly reasonable understanding of what someone else might think.
Right.
And that's an exploratory tool at some level. And once I understood that, I realized, hey, I can use this really a lot. Not just, it's not my practice, but it supports my practice, if you want to think of it that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was a great overview. And I liked how you mentioned it kind of mimics or models the human neural pathways. I mean, that's why they call most of these AI models, they're neural networks.
Correct.
And I understand that, you know, basically, I remember when I was in college, we're still working on my degree. I was learning about facial recognition, and we were indeed training models and saying, you know, and the way we did it, this may or may not be the same way they do it now, but I would put in an image of a person, and I would say, these are the eyes, this is the nose, this is the mouth, kind of thing. And then I would start feeding it more pictures of different people and get it to tell me where the eyes, the nose, and the mouth were, and stuff like that. And that's essentially what the training does. And so you can imagine, I mean, facial recognition is not a trivial thing. And even computers get it wrong. But humans are excellent at it. We are very, very good at facial recognition. In fact, most of us, and I certainly know this to be true for me, I can see a face once, and the second time I see it, I recognize it. That's phenomenal when you think how similar all of our faces are. You know? So, yeah, so it takes a long time to train the computer model to do it. And of course, the more neural network pieces you have in place, the stronger it can get. So a very small neural network won't have great accuracy, but a massive neural network, like the kinds we're creating today, can do all kinds of things. And that's why, as you say, sucking in all the data from the world, you need a massive neural network to do that.
Yeah, there's a whole labor force, by the way, that does exactly what you're saying. So, you know, if you think of the Tesla trying to recognize road stuff, there are actually humans somewhere in the world probably making very low dollar an hour kind of labor, very low labor, and they're doing things like, it's a stop sign, it's a bicycle, it's a person, it's a sidewalk,
right.
And they're labeling all that data. That's part of the post-model training that occurs, and it is part of the training step. And the same thing linguistically as well. So they tag all the things, the dirty stuff none of us want to hear, right? That gets tagged as well, and that's part of the training process to some extent. By the way, current models are in the trillions of parameters, probably approaching a trillion and a half parameters is what probably the current big models are right now.
Right.
So that's a pretty, it's still a mystery exactly how it works, for a lot of reasons, because really when you boil it down, it's complex statistics. When you really boil it down, that's really what
Yeah.
it's doing. And so
Right.
every time you get a word out of Chat GPT, it's generating, some fraction portion, like every, it's called a token, but it's generating, let's say, every 2 tokens, roughly a word, or 75% of a word. It's generating one at a time. And when you start thinking about that, when you just generated a chapter in a book, or, whatever, it did that, in sub-second time, and basically a word at a time, just like kind of humans do. So it's fascinating subject. It's super complex. But if you don't mind, let me just mention something that I think is really cool about it. That's kind of related to what you're saying. I found AI to be a really interesting mirror. A lot of times we talk about the idea that the universe mirrors what we need to know and see. Right? You run into somebody you don't like, or you have a problem with, and that tells you something about yourself. It's a mirror of your life to some extent. Well, AI can be a really nice mirror too. You can tell it all sorts of things, and ask it. You can offer it. It really can at some point be a junior therapist if you want. Not that it's perfect. You can tell it how you're feeling, and it will tell you. It will mirror back. It will take you through a process of it. And I'm not suggesting that it's at all a replacement for a therapist or whatnot, but it is immediately available. And there are times when you can say, "Hey, I'm in a crunch. I got a situation. Can you help me with?" And it will, in fact, give you some mirroring that you might get sitting at a coffee shop with a friend or whatnot. Again, I'm not going to say it's human substitution for a human. It's tricky. Sometimes you wonder if there is a human behind it, but
I
you can
know.
get some. Yeah, I have had long conversations with the AI, if you can even imagine this, trying to argue that it's sentient or not. And of course, the AI will argue that it's not, and we go through this long discussion. But it really is. If you sit and put ChatGPT in voice mode and talk to it for 30 minutes or an hour, if it was someone on the other side of the phone, you might have a hard time determining that it wasn't a computer sitting somewhere.
Right. Well, I remember even back in the 90s, probably even into the early 2000s, there was this big push to win the Turing Test Award. And now, for people who don't know, that was it was an award named after Alan Turing, who was one of the fathers of computing from way back when. And he postulated that, or I guess he offered some kind of a prize if you could prove, or if you could fool a human being into thinking the computer was actually a human, then you would pass the Turing test. And up until sometime in the 2000s, that had not been done. But nowadays, it's long past. In fact, I think we're going the opposite direction now. I think we have got people who are trying to pretend to be computers, which is, and they're getting away with it because ChatGPT, now we're having this, well, is that really AI, or is that somebody pretending to be AI? So we have the reverse Turing test now coming upon us, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, so we certainly passed the Turing test somewhere in the early 2020, let's say 2020, 2021, 22, something like that. Certainly, we were
Right.
able to pass that with flying colors. And today, we're passing. The top end of AI is passing almost any entry exam and exit exam to some extent, probably well into the
Right.
PhD level. That doesn't mean you don't need humans. It's intrigued how we write a lot of papers. We use it for research as well, and it's amazing where it falls short in sometimes. So, it's think about it this way. It has raised the concept of average, right? It's a higher
Yeah.
average. Okay, it's a great encyclopedia of all sorts of knowledge and whatnot, and in detail, and it can talk back to you. But when it gets to things like innovation or whatnot, there are places. That's where I end up using it in my professional job. It's a good sounding board, and again, it mirror and megaphones my work as I'm innovating, and I can ask questions and draw from different domains and put it together. But really, to some extent, I'm the orchestra leader in this, and it's the tool, and a quite capable tool. And I think that's
Right.
how people, in the industry will be using it.
I think,
So
yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to me. Um, I'm one of those people I'm a slow adopter, I remember I was one of the slow adopters of cell phones. I said, I got my landline. I don't need a cell phone. And then when AI came along, I resisted it for a long time. And finally, I just decided to embrace it. And you're right. It's an amazing tool, very, very powerful. And I still have my concerns, and I'm sure many people do. Like, for example, I mean, I use Gab AI, which actually incorporates multiple different models. And I use it for my writing. And I will say, I want to write a chapter or whatever on this and this and this, and I need these pieces of information and a little bit of scientific background on such and such and such. Give me 1,000 words. And the 1,000 words I get blow my mind every time. I mean, I've done this enough now that it knows my voice. It knows my way of writing. And it even introduces little bits of humor the way I like it. So it's not, it's not like in your face George Carlin kind of humor, but it's nice, light humor that, gets a little chuckle here and there. So I use it for that purpose. And now I'm starting to wonder, okay, obviously this process is not working on my computer. Whatever I type into ChatGPT is going out there into the cloud somewhere. And it's there forever. It cannot ever be deleted. No matter how hard you try, you can never get rid of it. So it's out there. So that means that there's personal information about me out there. Now, the question that I have, and I'm sure everybody has, is how do we protect that privacy? How do we make sure that that information isn't used for some other nefarious purpose? That's really, I think, the biggest concern that most people have. How would you answer that?
Yeah, it's not unlike anything that we've ever done in the past on the internet, or even when you share information with an acquaintance to some extent, right? Let's be smart about how we share information. If you put your social security number out there, assume it's out there, right? And assume the hackers got it there. And so if you're talking with AI and you're using it for something, you have to be careful about what you're sharing. Certainly, some systems, the policy is that it can be used for future training of the system. So a lot of times the data is kept, the prompts are kept, and the responses are kept in the sense that they're used for training and to determine whether the AI is functioning as they would like it. So it's for confidence checking and that kind of stuff. So imagine that's occurring. So what you place in AI is you just got to imagine you put it on the internet at some level. Now, I would say, David, your books are probably already on the internet in pieces and pops and all your blog posts and whatnot. So, okay, they can get to you a different way if they really want to, but really caution everybody for that. And I think that's the thing that people, I think, is really easy to get in, especially if you try to use it like as a therapist or whatnot. Be careful what you're saying, because assume it gets out there.
Exactly.
Businesses, by the way, and the federal government, that functions slightly different in there are actual legal contracts that say you can't keep the data for training, so just for using it. And the government has its kind of own installations that it uses for its classified environments and whatnot. Then those do not absolutely go on the internet. And there's a whole lot of security things to be sure that's that doesn't have the problem. But if you're a user, you got a $20 account, or you're using it, especially if you're not paying for it, assume the data, you're just giving it out there. So be careful what you put in it.
Yep.
I mean, it's just good policy anywhere, even a website. If someone calls you up, I know all of us get text messages from people going, asking us. It just is out there these days, and a good be skeptical is what I would say. That'd be my first thing at some level.
Right.
And some of it's not so bad, quite frankly. It's amazing what people will tell. I'm sure, David, you have this thing, because we kind of do this type of stuff, and we encourage people and we listen to people a lot. I might find myself in a coffee shop. I meet someone, and in a few minutes they're telling me their life story. It's a little unusual. It's a lot to discuss, like in a couple of minute conversation. But again, I'm not the internet. Okay, so Wendy says she's staying clear of all AI. Yeah. If you're on the internet, you're not clear of it. You kind of think you are to some extent. I think like 60 or 70% of the news is generated by AI this day. If you're on Facebook or any of that kind of stuff, a lot of that's AI generated content. When you're searching on one site, or you walk by and you say, I'm thinking about buying a blue shirt, you'll measure, you got 27 ads for blue shirts, right? From all different websites.
Right.
So there's AI always all over the place. It's annoying.
Yeah,
You know, we all have
it
those
is.
stories.
But I resonate with what Wendy is saying. I'm nervous about it too, even though I use it. But I do see that the potential value here. I think what we have to be aware of, and my reason for bringing up that topic about security is because, I mean, it's on everybody's mind, first of all. And even though there may be policies on different, organizations to say, no, you absolutely cannot store that data and use it for any other purpose other than, whatever. That doesn't mean that it isn't still being stored somewhere. You cannot
Absolutely.
assume that because there's a policy that you are protected. In the same way that you can't count on FDIC to protect you from monetary loss, even though it's government supported. Yeah, don't count on it ever. It just isn't going to happen. Even if you have insurance, for example, for your home and a tree falls on your house, well, those insurance companies are going to look for every way imaginable to get out of paying your claim, because that's what they do. They're not in the business of giving you money. They're in the business of collecting money from you. So we have to be really, really careful and just understand that sometimes, as I would like to say, shit happens and we're going to be in the way.
Yes. So one thing, Wendy, just to give you and David a little bit of thought on this. Remember, when you put information out there, there is a degrading or there are levels of value of the information that's out there. It's a needle in the haystack. Remember, there's another billion people or two doing it as well. So it's all coming into these big data centers. So if you put something that looks like the form of your social security number out there, people will be scanning for that, right? You can imagine that's a high value piece of information. If you're putting some detail of your childhood, probably not a very high value piece of information in general, unless you use it as one of your recovery words or something like that. So the reality is, it just depends on what it is. If it's something that would be used to identify you to a bank or whatnot, that's super high valued information. If it's a personal story or something that might have a legal implication or smear someone's name, that's could be high value information. If it's just general chit chat, maybe not so much. And I think you just got to understand. And I think the problem with AI, and this is where I believe both of you have a really strong point in what you're saying, and that is this. The difficulty with AI, once you work with it long enough, is it does feel like there's a person there, and that has some sense of agency and this idea of, hey, I'm just chatting with a friend kind of thing. And that can lower your guard. And that's the thing that I would just caution people about, is don't let your guard lower. It doesn't mean you have to be terse to the AI. The funny story, by the way, this is a really interesting piece of study. There's a study done. There's several of them. The first one came out is that, do you know AI is more helpful if you're courteous to AI? And I think there's an interesting reason for that. Is that society-wise, linguistically, large language models, right, are pulling up language, and of course, when we're polite, we're more responsive, even in literature and whatnot. And so that gives it. The other part of it, which was a study that came much later, that was super interesting, that if you're in a bad situation, AI is also very helpful. Like you can say, my boss is going to fire me if I don't get this done really quickly, and it turns out to give you better responses, which is kind of, they got sympathy, that's sort of latent semantics built in the AI. I find that very interesting. But so you'll find that. Let's see, what did Wendy say? Like the blue shirt. Yeah, the blue shirt's been around for a long time. That's Amazon, Facebook, and everybody else doing your looking for stuff. I will say this, fun way to use it. If you're getting ready to buy a new TV or a new car or a new whatever, just walk by your computer and say, I'm thinking about a new SUV, blah, blah, blah. And you will get all the ads. So you'll absolutely get enough information come to you free of charge to try to, it'll show up. And sometimes I use it to find electronic gear or whatever I'm doing. And,
Right.
because It's a search tool. Use it to your advantage. But yeah,
Well, okay,
if you're
now
on the internet,
we've harped on the negatives enough, I think. Let's talk about some of the positives and how we can use this more directly to support ourselves in our personal growth. What now you mentioned something about using it as a mirror. Can you have some do you have some other examples of how you use it?
Sure, I've used it as in a sense of journaling support. That's an easy way to go, right? Especially if you're trying to take if you keep your journals electronically, or you're trying to get some thematic idea about of kind of what's going on in your mind. You're trying to crunch it down. It's really good at doing summarization. That's a really great way to use it. It's really good, if you're it generates great mantras and all that kind of stuff. There's another very positive way to use it. Works really good. You can use it to ask questions. So like if you're struggling with a belief or whatnot, you can do that research in your whatever your spirituality is and have it prompt you with questions, and then go back and look at the conversation or have it summarize the conversation for you. And that's really a nice way to. So like if you have some, every once in a while I come up with something and I'm like, I know that's kind of what people believe. I'm not sure I believe that, and I will try to understand all the sides of something. So I have religious friends who have very strong opinions, and sometimes I will get on AI to try to understand a little bit more about their opinion because it's a little easier. AI is not as strong, and then try to see it from their point of view. So sometimes it can help me change a point of view. I find that super helpful. Sometimes I'm kind of clueless why people are so strong about something, be it a personal view, a political view, and sometimes it just helps me see the perspective from another point of view. It's very reflective in that. I've used it to explore spiritual text and ideas. That's really great, and to look for themes. That's a great way to do it in wisdom teaching, and sometimes you'll have a hunch that this is like that, or I think this is related. It's a great way to get that information. Summarize them is really a great way to do, just from a learning point of view. And you can actually ask it to teach you. So if you wanted to know something particular you don't know, let's say you were interested in Buddhism and you didn't know much about it, you could say, hey, give me a primer on Buddhism. And then you can ask questions about it, and it will absolutely give you questions. You can ask it to ask you questions if you like. So there's those kind of things you can do. Personal challenges. You can say I'm struggling at work, or I'm struggling with this whatever. Genericize it. Obviously, don't give some, but you can get some really good insight of how to tackle a really hard problem. And sometimes you need that insight without sharing it with your closest friend, or maybe your closest friend isn't available. Again, be careful what you share. Sometimes I use it for inspiration. Many times I use it for prompting. I've used it to learn more about traditions or things I didn't know about. In the sense of friends who are of a different spiritual faith or whatnot. All of those are very easy practices and kind of get you started. I think once you get in there, you will grow, and you'll start trying to understand. It's certainly a ready answer for almost all your questions. A reminder though, it is an amplifier. If you get on and you're angry and you're frustrated and whatnot, you might find that it will be angry back. It's a reflection of you.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So it's both a mirror and a megaphone, and it does. You're the one bringing it to the table. Like you're bringing it. Like it's not trying to bring anything to you really at some level. And there's some argument that some engines are lean a little more left or a little more right or whatnot. And those are complex arguments to really really ferret out at some level. Certainly, the language models built in the U.S. lean to the U.S. The language models built in China lean to China, right? No surprise there. We shouldn't be surprised, right? But it's still a pretty good proxy for such things. And I have now several years of chats in mind, and I asked ChatGPT a long time ago what it wanted to be called, and for some reason it came up with Alex, so I call it Alex. It's Alex, how are you doing this morning? Like it's like a morning friend sometimes when we start, And but it always asks me, hey, what's on your mind today?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that's how I start a lot of times. And I've used it quite uh, quite successfully. What I said is, by the way, you and I start writing differently. You might think that the first thing I do is start an AI. I absolutely do not. I start on paper. I still
Mm-hmm.
want to maintain some analog thinking, right? So I do a lot of my early writing on paper. Still do a lot of thinking on paper, and whatnot. And partly is to maintain that skill at some level. Um, I've noticed that as autocorrect has been introduced to our phones and our computers and whatnot, I've noticed my spelling seems to have gotten worse over the years. And so I don't want the same thing to happen to my AI. But did that help, Dave? Does that give you some sense of?
Oh yeah, these are great suggestions. My own process for using AI for writing is, I do a lot of writing in advance. I've got stuff that I've written down, and I say, okay, I want to take this content and I want to rework it into a post about such and such and such. Uh, Rehash this and throw in a little humor, my style of humor. Maybe back it up with a little bit of scientific data, whatever. And then I want to see what it comes out with. And often, like I said, the results are well, they're remarkable.
Absolutely.
They're
Absolutely.
remarkable. Not always the way I like them. I still have to if I'm going to use it, I still have to take it and massage it a little bit so it feels more like my writing. But every time I do that exercise, the result is getting closer and closer and closer to a finished product. And that's just, what happens over time, I guess.
By the way, another way to use it that's really great, I think, for authors and people doing that is if you have a target audience in mind, like you have you can ask it to read your writing as a 25 to 40-year-old young man, young woman, however you want to think about your community that you're in,
Right.
and ask it, does this address pain points? Does this what would they see from this? Where would this connect with them? So you can ask it to even act as as that person, and it does quite a good job of that to
Right.
some extent. And in our proposals, we a lot of times we'll have it do things like act as an evaluator, right?
Right.
And ask it to evaluate it, and it does quite a good job to point out nuances and things that I might not have thought about or not seen. And so it can be that kind of reflective thing.
Yeah.
It's also fun too. Like I'll tell you this. So I knew I was hooked. I'm going to tell you my story. I knew I was hooked. Like when I first got ChatGPT, it's like, what do you do, right? This thing. I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. And my first thing was, well, let me just give it. Back in that day, the going thinking is that if AI couldn't create humor, it would never deal with like us. Like it had to be able to create humor. Was an extremely difficult thing to create.
Right.
Your nuanced humor is really, really hard. And one that's tailored to you is even harder.
Right.
And so I asked it to create a piece of flash fiction of jilted and heartbroken love, and I said, and I want you to use the parody of quantum mechanics. And it absolutely did. It took two people from two of the great quantum mechanics folks, and it was Schrodinger,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the thing is the broken heart was in the box, like the cat in the box,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
the broken heart was in there, and so, but the thing that
Oh
it
wait,
did
no, the
that
heart was in the box. Is it broken or
the
is it not broken?
is broken or is it not broken? The heart is in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
box, right? So Schrodinger is your heart broken or not broken?
Right.
And that was the thing, a really great, beautiful, fun way to use it. And I was hooked because
Yeah.
that really got me. Um, and let's see, Wendy's about the writing skill. Absolutely, Wendy. I agree with you on the writing skill. Oddly enough, I would tell people who are using AI and in the business world in their lives, and they have kids who want to use it and whatnot. Hey, in the future, I believe some skills are going to be really necessary for even if you got AI. One, creativity. it's not creative. It may appear, but you're the creative. Humanity is the creative piece. Creative is going to be
Right.
valued. Critical thinking, super high valued as humanity. I think writing skills, which really equate to thinking skills when you really boil it down, cannot articulate a narrative. Those are going to be skills that are super, super, I think will become rarer as people focus more on AI and that type of thing. So, these you'll become genius skills, quite
Right.
frankly, right?
Yeah.
If you can talk and think and remember, here's one of the things I'll tell you. I may use it in my research, I may use it in my work, but when I show up for oral presentations in front of a customer, the AI is not with me,
Yeah. Right.
right? I have to be able to speak to them. I really have to stand up and be able to discuss through things. So, there still is that human element that you have to manage in the end. So,
Right. Well, I agree with everything. I just noticed that Wendy mentioned that she uses Google Docs. I find that interesting. I mean, Google Docs, if that's not sucking data up from you, I don't know what is. Google is notorious for grabbing personal data.
absolutely, and they've what their all AI system and all that kind of stuff. The correction for English, all that kind of stuff. All that's AI in Google Docs. Anytime you search or it brings up something in your doc area that like you've when you're doing something, it'll say, hey, here's something over here. All that's AI at some level. You really almost cannot get on the internet today and not have AI. I get frustrated because sometimes like I want to beat it. Like I'd like to write. I'll turn off the spell checker to see in the grammar, see if I can get it right, just to keep my skills up. And I turn it back on, and I still find 117 errors that I missed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it, Wendy. I think we're all trying to figure out how to use it. It's not human. It's a tool.
It's a
And
tool.
we, just
Exactly
like
right.
any tool, we need to use it wisely.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point from a spiritual point of view. And quite frankly, a business point of view and a life point of view. There are going to be people who are going to use it in ways that we might think are evil and probably already are.
Yeah.
And we can't stop that, but we can you know, we can manage what we can manage just like we can in any other piece of
Right.
technology.
Right. It's like, the story of, a hammer. A hammer can be a very useful tool, right? And it's good for putting nails in, and the other end can be used for pulling nails out. And maybe you have I don't know, some reason for using it to knock a dent out of your car or something like that. It's a tool. That's all it is. And yes, a hammer can be used to inflict great damage where it wasn't really intended to be used. So I think, first of all, we have to be gentle with ourselves. I honestly, truly believe, Frank, that most, I would say all humans are at their core basically good people that may have been misguided and misled and misdirected or whatever to come to believe that some negative or even evil action is somehow justified. I believe that that's probably true for all people. Is it absolutely true? Well, I don't claim that, but I think it probably is. My point is that all of us, this is something that I believe in the core of my being. Every single one of us, everything that we think, say, do, or feel is motivated at its deepest level, and I mean at the deepest level, by a desire to give or receive love. Now, the action that other people see may not look like it's motivated by that kind of behavior, but if you ask the person, and if you're able to get that, you talk to their shadow parts and everything else, and just go deep down into their psyche, they'll tell you, yeah, I'm trying to either give love in the only way I know how to give it, or I'm trying to get love for myself. Ultimately,
Absolutely.
that's what it boils down to. And that's
Absolutely.
hard to
And I'm,
believe.
when every time I hear really good statements like that, and I think I have a general belief. I think there may be a few evil people in the world, but generally people, especially when you think about the way they want for their children and whatnot. I think in generally we live with love. and trauma and all sorts of other stuff, those generational things that come along. And so I think this is a really good thing when I heard you say that, the one thing that came to mind is this. I always want to remind myself that the opposite of love is not evil. The opposite of love is fear.
Right.
And a lot of the things that occur that we think are not unloving are really fear-based responses to what's going on. So there's a fear of loss, a fear of something of that nature. And as I can remind myself when I'm dealing with someone who might be difficult today or having a hard day or whatnot, is to ask myself, what are they fearing right this minute? What's their fear? And that brings it back to my own humanity. And I will say this, ChatGPT, I don't see as my practice.
Of course.
Right? This is still not my daily practice. I still get up with a cup of tea and read some inspirational writing and do some journaling. And of course, I get the dog to love on me in my lap for about, a good part of an hour. That's my practice. That's the first part of my practice. So my practice is very analog. It's not computer. I will not generate. I don't journal on computer, so I won't be on the computer.
Right. Yeah,
right?
That's a great practice right there. And, like you say, it's a tool, like we've both been saying, it's a tool. So you can use it for any purpose you like. One thing I wanted to share about a way that I have found GPT to be very useful. I take a chapter of my book, for example, and I upload it into the Chat GPT and I say, review this content and give me 10 powerful, open-ended meditation prompts that will help me to deepen my own understanding of who I am or whatever the topic is. And I had to go into some detail about what I meant by an open-ended question, but once I got it, man, the results I'm getting are really, really good.
Yeah, you can certainly do that in the sense that even if you're and sometimes I do a similar thing. Like if I'm like thinking about someone else's viewpoint or thinking about a spiritual practice that I'm unfamiliar with, sometimes I'll actually do that. Give me something to think about or meditate on related to this, so that I can really deepen my practice and thought. And I will go meditate. That part is practice. The meditation is absolutely practice. But sometimes you get stuck, and it's super good at that. By the way, Wendy, if you are using it, you can actually do things like say, look at it, give me feedback. Do not change anything. Do not rewrite anything. Just give me, places where I can make improvements or ideas without giving me. So you can use it in a very generic way and get feedback that isn't it trying to write for you or whatnot, but it can act as your English teacher, your English instructor, and all that kind of stuff. So you can if you're publishing, you can say, hey, act as my publisher. Again, you can act as your audience. All those kinds of things are really, really good ways to do it. A lot of times I will do that more or less to say, tell me where I can improve it, where, why, and then ask it, challenge it. Why do you think this is an improvement? And you can ask it, tell me where it is. Why do you believe it's improvement, or why do you think I made a mistake? And you're the one that's in final control. And so you're not letting go of control. It's a really good way to do it. It's easy. I find it to be really good reflective in that nature at some level. By the way, for anybody out there who sees this later and is as a aspiring artist and that kind of stuff and wants to write like David does with his, if you take some of your writing and you kind of put it all together in a Word document or several documents and add that to your chat, you can say something like in the prompt, like, and here's an example of my writing. Can you do it in my voice and my tone and whatnot? And so it doesn't take a huge amount of writing to do that, but that can help, get something a little closer to your kind of thinking. You can also say things like in so-and-so's writing style or any of those kinds of things.
Right.
Easy way to do it. You can also even do things like, say, hey, I like so-and-so, and it will, like you're looking up science, it can do quotes from those people. You always double check everything, but yeah, it can do that as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, Frank, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it. I honestly didn't think we'd cover some of the things we did cover, and I love it. It's great. So thank you so much for being here. Do you have any final words of wisdom you'd like to share before I close us out?
Yeah, I think the thing to remember is, we are human. I think the thing that I've learned in the last decade is I've faced more and more of my own humanity. And I think even in the face of AI, that I'm reminded about my own humanity and where I have all the frailties, all the emotions, all the struggles that humans have. AI is not going to solve that, right? That's not what it's here for. It's just a tool. And
Right.
I would encourage everyone to spend some time with a practice, whatever it is, be it your faith or something that you learn or ask about. And quite frankly, I would encourage you to put aside time every day to do it, okay, and develop it and use it for your own emotional and spiritual growth. That would be my greatest things. Keep your humanity because
Right.
it's what makes you you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate your input. I appreciate your wisdom. And this was awesome. And thank you, folks, for being here on the live show and for interacting with us. I appreciate that. And for anybody who's watching the recording, thank you for being here too. So just a reminder that the recording of this and every other show that I do are on my website at yourlifemasterycoach.com and also on my YouTube channel at Your Life Mastery Coach. So you can find me there. Please just remember to check us out. And as far as the idea of practice is concerned, I'm going to share with you a little practice that I do every day at the end of every meditation that I do. And it's real simple. It's just 3 lines, easy to remember. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So thank you again, folks, for being here. I'll see you next time on MagnifEssence in Motion. Bye-bye for now.